Hi, this is Dr. Megan here for Mental Training Monday, and I am joined by my colleague and friend, Dr. Julia Amato, who played NCAA basketball at Brown University, and so we are going to be here today talking a little bit about the March Madness tournament. It's one of the greatest things that we have with sports, and so we're talking about some of the fails, some of the really awesome things we've been seeing. Those brackets for everybody I think are a little bit messed up right now. So I brought her in today to just shed some light on the sports psychology behind this tournament. And so, Julie, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, we're seeing a lot of athletes that typically in season they're performing really well, but when it comes down to it, foul shots they're making really terrible mental mistakes, the handling of the pressure. What do you think is really going on there?
Well, first of all, bracketology, March Madness, my favorite time of year. And so this is like Christmas morning when the tournament starts. And part of it is, I think, just the excitement. I mean, there's such a high level of excitement and emotionality, and so that's why we see sometimes athletes who are typically, very calm and composed. There's a lot being made of these games, and there's a lot of money being poured in, and TV cameras, and advertising, and there's even an actual show dedicated to being selected for the tournament. And so, there's a lot around this, and there's a lot of pressure involved. And so some of the athletes, some of the really great athletes who are very strong physically and emotionally really thrive on that and rise to the occasion and perform extremely well under pressure. And then oftentimes we do see, athletes who might typically, for example, be 85-90% free throw shooters at the end of a game, all of a sudden they get a little tight and they get a little tense. And when the game's on the line, they might not convert like they typically do. And so, it's a really exciting topic to be talking about today from a sports psychology standpoint and kind of handling pressure and how we can kind of understand the magnitude of these games and why we see some teams really rise to the top and other teams that you expect to do so well maybe not perform as you expect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking with that pressure, I mean, we see a lot of teams, or we have so far this year in the tournament, where Friday night they go out, they either have an upset or an incredible game, and then all of a sudden Sunday they fall. And so can you talk a little bit about, how do we sometimes see two different teams, Friday versus Sunday?
Yeah. So great question. I mean, this is why we fill up the bracket and why so many times after the first weekend our bracket is completely busted. And there's really two things going on here. True. It's so true. It's like, man, we thought we had it all right. We picked, we've got a 15 and a 2 upset this year, which is kind of rare to see. I think what can happen are two things from a mental sort of training standpoint. One is that the teams that are the highly ranked teams, these are teams that have been in the top 25 all year, they're expected to win. Then they come up against an opponent that is clearly considered less talented. And number one, we don't know much about that team. They're not in this national spotlight. We haven't seen them play very much. But number two, one thing happens where I think the higher ranked team feels the pressure. They feel that pressure, the expectation that they're supposed to win, and or they simply overlook that team and they start to look into their second round game. And so when you do that, you really can't focus on the technical aspects of basketball that you need to perform in order to get the win and to get the result you want. So what we're seeing here are, when the underdog beats a favorite, oftentimes the underdog, conversely, is playing with no pressure. They have nothing to lose. They're coming into these games thinking, nobody expects us to win, so we're just going to have fun with this. We're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Right?
Better way to play.
Yeah, and so you see this happening where, these great upsets happen typically because a favorite feels that enormous amount of pressure to perform, and so performance anxiety might kick in, and or they overlook an opponent, and you see an underdog come in with nothing to lose, and that's why these first round games are so exciting. And then what ends up happening, as you brought up, hey, this underdog might have a huge upset on a Friday night, then they have to come in on a Sunday and play again, and they're still riding the emotional high from that upset. And so, in sports, we really want our emotions to be kind of even and level and relaxed and kind of more business focused. Like, we're going to go out here and actually play the game. But when you're getting texts and phone calls from friends and you're so excited because you knocked off number 2 Michigan State, then in the next round, you might see you're riding too high emotionally and you haven't been able to kind of hit that emotional reset button and even out. Yeah.
And almost you see that depletion of energy and stuff by the end of the second half of that game on Sunday. That energy may not be there on that team. So for those individuals going into the Final Four, those last teams that are left, Do you have any advice that you would give as far as like the approach to the game?
Yeah. So here we are. We're Final Four weekends upon us. And it's so exciting. And we've got, sort of a diverse group in the men's side where we see a 10 seed in Syracuse who didn't expect to be there.
Right.
And so in some ways, the pressure is off Syracuse a little bit. But let's call it what it is. The Final Four is, extremely exciting environment. There's cameras, there's attention, national attention. And so all the teams are going to be feeling it. And so I think one piece of advice really would be to just come together and understand like your game plan. As you're leading up to the games, don't think about basketball. It's okay to be involved in your classwork and with your friends and doing other things that are not all about basketball. And so I think sometimes we overthink it and we get so focused on it that just builds up more tension and anxiety. So if I were talking to any of these players heading into the Final Four, I would be saying stay busy, do things other than basketball, and then when it comes down to game time, do your typical game approach. This is truly, it is just another basketball game. And so just being able to understand that and manage your nerves and excitement appropriately and kind of stay on that even keel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So get back to those hobbies, do things outside of your basketball world to kind of reset and go into that game in a very neutral mental reset. Really awesome advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Julie, for joining me today here talking about March Madness. And so good luck to those teams, and thank you so much for tuning in to Mental Training Monday. We'll see you back next week.